Hey everybody, in case you were interested, I have updated my Patreon page. If you want to find out how to get your name in the credits at the end of every Caddicarus episode, or even have 24-hour early access to every Caddicarus episode with no ads in them at all, then stay until the end of this video or go to the description to my Patreon page right now to see what you have to do to get it. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned to the end of this video. Greetings and salutations, my beautiful people, and welcome to the Caddicarus show, where I always have to do the dirty deed of deciding whether or not things deserve to be slaughtered or salvaged. And today is a pretty shit day, because not only have I got an eye infection, look, seriously I do, it's very painful, but also I gotta do nothing but chores today.
This is so awful.
So yeah, sorry that you called me at a bad time, but hey, I can always see you guys next week, can't I? Ta-ra. Don't you ever wish sometimes that life was more like this? Well, wish no longer, because that is exactly what Namco's Ridge Racer was like on the original PlayStation. You start the game and within less than 30 seconds you pick a track, a car, and with barely any loading screens at all, you're then doing this. Originally a late 1993 arcade title in Japan, Ridge Racer was one of the most influential and revolutionary racing games of its time, and despite the dire lack of content for the home console port, probably one of the most accurate arcade to console transitions of its time. And for one of the first ever PS1 games ever released as a launch title, yes, it is an impressive feat with everything it did, again, for the time. Also, side note, please tell me somebody, because I don't know fully myself, what did these numbers on the spines of PAL region PS1 games mean? I always thought it was the chronological order of a game's release, and if that's true, then that makes Ridge Racer the first ever game released on the PAL PlayStation. I don't know though, so somebody please tell me and I'll be so happy that I'll sniff your favourite seat. And what's better than all of this? You get to play it on the PSP!
Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
Yeah, I don't want my PSP anymore. I think I'm gonna sell it. I mean, you know this is going to be a good time when you start the game and you get to play another arcade game from Namco while the game is loading. Galaxian. More like Fantastixian. I died! I forgot this game! And here we are at the title screen.
Ridge Racer!
Wow! Yes, I'm ready for a race on the ridge! Oh my, well excuse you, game. Just gonna pick my car and then pick the first track and see how everything goes. Oh Jesus, it's taken a while to get the hang of this. That's the problem with going back to old racing games, isn't it? But still, I persevered and came a very respectable fifth place. Fifth place? Shit. No, that's not good enough, Rash Racer. Don't you game over me, mister. If I can't continue, then how else am I expected to beat Rid, Gur, Ace, Rups, Zna, and Mako? Especially Gur, twatty Gur. Gur the first race car. So hey, let's just get this out of the way. For one of the first PS1 games ever made, and for the pure speed and accuracy to the arcade cabinet, or at least as close as it could be, the game looks and sounds bloody great. It looks better than many PS1 games that came out over 5 years later. There's so much rich detail everywhere, so much colour, flashing lights, time of day shifting from day to sunset to night, and the soundtrack kicks ass along with the sound effects and crazy announcer.
Okay, it's the last stretch. Keep going.
And just as a personal thing here, I always love it in these older racing games whenever you look to the horizon and see the world around you literally vanish and appear depending on where you are. It's like the world itself is building and collapsing alongside your driver, who's been made to think this is actually a real city, but it might not be because it's secretly a load of robots quickly rebuilding the landscape whenever he or she appears around the corner, so they'll never notice the difference between that and real life. It's a little bit like that. Where's the city gone? Oh look, there it is. Considering as well that the arcade Ridge Racer only had first person for realism, and the PS1 version gave you the option to race in first or third person so you can look at your car's horrid green bogey bum, impressive is definitely the word. If the main goal of Ridge Racer was to make it feel like an arcade game, well, it does the job perfectly well. Even if by today's standards the cars themselves do look a bit like, well, chicken cages. Talking about sound, one of my favourite things about this game is that the technology for car damage and crash physics weren't quite there yet, so whenever you hit another car or a wall, much like the donk that the Wipeout crafts make, you can bounce off the target, but with much more of a kind of noise. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's very I can't think of any other word other than So, what kind of noise would a car make if it crashed into a wall at 120 miles per hour? Oh, just someone give this guy a raise! I may love that noise, but what isn't so great is getting stuck behind a car that magically knows every corner you're going to make and every racing line you need to take. It's the most aggravating thing in the fucking world to have everything stripped away from you when you were doing so well by that one car that just won't ever leave you the hell alone and keeps bouncing you back constantly. Yes, man, I got past him. Ha ha. Ha ha. Unfortunately, the controls are a little hard to get to grips with as well. Wonky, I think, is the best word for them. Every car luckily has different stats, and they majorly affect the way you do drive, so you can pick whichever one suits your needs the best. But it's more the little things you don't expect to happen, like letting go of accelerate to slow down for a corner, and instead of turning the corner slower like you expect, your whole car darts off sharply in the direction that you want to turn. I don't quite get this. And we must also not forget the drifting mechanic, another thing that this game did that made it stand out. However, this isn't like drifting nowadays. I would argue that this was implemented a little bit badly. The attempt is admirable, but it's just not very well done. Basically, you need to turn your car while accelerating at a particular angle in order to activate it, and that's fine, it feels real enough, along with keeping it going around every other corner. That's also fine, and it feels really good to nail it. However, whenever you activate it, you slow yourself down to half the speed, and once you're done with the drift, trying to straighten yourself out takes far too long, is too sensitive, and will just end whenever it decides to and set you on a random course either to the left or the right after your tires lock back into the ground, again whenever they feel like it. Essentially, it's cool that it was in the game, but it's just not that helpful or very fun to get back into the action after you're done with it. It becomes too risky and uncontrollable, especially when it happens by accident, and I ended up just trying my hardest not to activate it. Although that's impossible in the yellow car. Shit my bed, this thing is a nightmare since it has the worst traction of all the starting cars, and every time you turn a corner there's a 50-50 chance that you will... Okay, so I know this game is very revolutionary and important and it's considered a classic, but this is where some controversial opinions from myself will be shared. This game, when you take a step back, as iconic as it is and as classic as it is for the PlayStation, is not that great, really. I mean, yes, you cannot be too hard on it for the time it was released and in the very early days of 3D polygonal gaming, but the question you must ask yourself with any video game, new or old, is if you would bother playing it ever again for whatever reason. And Ridge Racer 1 is not a game I will ever bloody revisit. You begin the game and disappointingly enough there is absolutely nothing going on here. No joke, it's one of the barest races I've ever seen. There are 4 cars in total from the offset, with admittedly a load more to unlock after mastering the Galaxian minigame and mastering the final track. Somehow. But the real kicker is that there's only one track, with 4 variations of it depending on the difficulty you choose, where you'll also get access to 1 branching alternate path of that same track depending on the difficulty. That's it, that's the entire game, there's nothing else here. And the track difficulties themselves only majorly change the speed of your car from the easy track, medium track, hard track, and... TT. Well, that doesn't look like any TT I've ever seen. And to be totally honest, whatever TT means, I guess it's time trial, there's no point doing it. Look, you race one opponent to try unlocking that car, and even with a perfect start, you get mauled straight away. You get mauled!
At last we will have revenge.
And by lap 2, check this out, how the fuck am I ever supposed to catch up now? I guess you could keep knocking the car back, but there's no reverse mirror or anything, so how are you supposed to see where it's coming from? Fuck this bit, it's total bullshit. Look, don't get me wrong, I understand, this was part of the revolution of 3D racing, and it was extremely early days, but aside from the gorgeous graphics for the time, there's nothing else this game majorly has going for it. It's the same issue I have with Tekken 1, and even that game doesn't look that great in my opinion. Just play Super Mario Kart, a console racing game released in Japan over 2 years before Ridge Racer hit the Japanese PS1, and you'll see what I mean. I know it's a totally different game and nowhere near as technically impressive, and it isn't even a racing simulator, but there's more racers and more tracks. Not to mention, even a few months before on the Sega Genie Drive, a console generation before, there was Virtua Racing, which many consider to have laid the groundwork for how console racing games specifically work in 3D from that point onwards, and that still has more variety in the tracks and... multiplayer!
What?
Yeah, there's no multiplayer. Oh, wait a sec, who's saying that?
No multiplayer?
No.
On a racing game?
No, who are you?
I'm you.
What?
I'm inside you.
Why can I taste haddock?
Yes, this is something I don't quite understand and honestly never will, especially if something like Virtua could have 2 players on a game that demanding on a console that much weaker. What's the excuse here? It didn't even do the stupid link cable bollocks most of the early PS1 racers did, so that you'd need 2 TVs, 2 consoles and 2 copies of the game to play someone else and make it feel like an emulated arcade machine for your house. For as dumb and as inconvenient that system was, at least it had the novelty of trying to emulate an arcade, which Ridge Racer originally was in Japan 1 year before the PS1 version came out, so why didn't it at least try that? The whole thing just feels like a prototype, a glimmer of things to come, and that's not bad at all, but to be released at full price back in the day seems a little bit shit in my opinion.
So what's the fate of this game exactly? Well, the thing is, I can't really salvage it because I've got no desire whatsoever to replay it, and it's far too clunky for its own good, but I can't slaughter it either because it did lay a lot of groundwork. This was a revolutionary game, along with Daytona USA on the Sega Saturn. This was some impressive shit, so I have to respect it to some degree. Well, I mean, considering that this might very well be the first ever PAL PS1 game made in production, and it is in its original black label jewel case and everything, I'm going to do something that I think I have never done before. I'm going to respect my elders and put this safely back on the shelf. You old fart.
In conclusion, we as gamers have a lot to thank Ridge Racer for, along with all the other racers around that same time that further pushed what 3D graphics and racing games were capable of, but it didn't necessarily mean that they're much fun or brilliant to return to. And unlike returning to Super Mario 64 to not only witness and respect how 3D platforming evolved so much for its time, but also have a blast playing it at the same time because it's aged pretty damn decently, Ridge Racer for 3D racers has the witness and respect half of that package, but not the fun half. It's simply too clunky and too bare to be considered anything other than a distraction and an excuse to see where gaming was at that time. Nothing more though, in my opinion.
Ridge Racer Revolution, on the other hand, is a slightly different story. I remember playing this one all the time when I was a kid, but we'll come to that game when we come to it. Not quite yet, alright? So until next time, if it's your birthday today or watching this video, happy frickin' birthday to you, and please remember to stay beautiful.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and special thanks to every single one of these people on the screen right now that has donated more than a penny to the show. The reason I've done this today is because due to my channel getting hit pretty badly by demonetization issues, and even most recent uploads such as the Bugs Bunny and Tarzan videos being smacked a few hours after they went up, I've unfortunately had to edit my current Patreon reward tiers since I'm relying on it more than ever in this highly unstable YouTube climate. So this is me saying my biggest thanks to every single patron as of today when the changes happened. This also means though I've added in brand new benefits for your selfless donations as well, such as 24-hour early access to every episode of Caddicarus every week, completely ad-free and without any brand deal messages. And you can find out more about the little rewards I have for your generosity in the description below if you're interested. And due to some of these changes, I also totally understand if you don't want to support the show on Patreon anymore if you're already on it, or if you just don't want to anyway. It's completely optional, nobody's forcing you, my content will never be at ransom, and there's no hard feelings whatsoever. Before I go though, I'd love to also thank the top tier Patreon supporters in person, so ultra special thanks to Crash Rocks 1419, Omar Matu, Patrick Ferguson, Karsten, Robert Alamsha, I Have a Portal Gun, Gamer Man, Nicole Ganara, and Andy Ellis. Thank you to all of those people, so lovely, and thank you again to all of these names on the screen. Even if you just decide to look at the Patreon page in the description below, I couldn't be more thankful, so please do consider it. And until next time, if it's your birthday today or watching this video, happy frickin' birthday to you, and please remember to stay beautiful.
Subscribe.
I guess I'll see everyone next.
And there's the missing link.
What, between apes and humans? Thank you.
Ow.
Oh. Ow.
Have you forgotten how to try?
I forgot the dive. Oh, fuck it.